I'm going to have to go a little bit faster just because we're a bit short of time, but first of all, let's get straight into it now. So Phinx. What exactly is Phinx? Phinx is a tool that I wrote, which is basically allows you to migrate your database schema over time. You can go to the website, phinx.org, lovely Twitter bootstrap theme there. I didn't design it myself, but you can download it for free. Nice little project there. Now a little bit about why I wrote it in the first place. I used to work for a startup in Australia, and of course we used to send SQL files around by hand and email, and sometimes check them into Subversion, but Subversion was of course very slow, especially if you're working with a remote server. Australia is also a big country, so to send a file from one end to the other with the really bad internet there takes a long time. And then we switched to using DB deploy, which I think was first introduced in Java. And then later there was somebody wrote a task for Phinx, just one PHP file, but you could basically write your SQL in actual native SQL, put that in a file, and then use a Phinx task to execute it. And I've still got friends that use this today, and this is how they work in production. But we decided, after looking at a few other tools out there on the market, there was a lot of good PHP frameworks that had migrations built in, and there were good competitors in other systems. And then Ruby on Rails just came out with, and they had, of course, active migration, active record migrations. We thought, why can these Ruby people and these other frameworks have all this fun? Why isn't there a tool for PHP which is standalone and only does one thing and does that very well? So I stayed up late for a few nights and hacked out first version of Phinx, and then kept it to myself for quite a long time. I actually decided to open source it early 2012, and that was probably the best decision for the project. I think I made, since then we've done 32 releases. We've clocked up about 350,000 downloads on Packagist and Pair, but I shut Pair down. It's not really great compared to Composer. Got more than 70 contributors. It's now used as the default migration tool in Cake PHP since version 3.0.0, and it's built on top of Symfony components. And when I say built on top, we only use 3. So it's very lightweight. There's no dependencies on any framework except a few Symfony components. There's no doctrine deval, anything like that. It's all there in Phinx. A little bit about me. I've been writing PHP for almost 15 years, I think 13 or 14, but definitely for a while. You can find me on Twitter. There's my email and my website. I'll skip over this quickly, talk a little bit about where I'm from, if you're wondering. I'm actually Australian. I used to work for a fashion company in Australia where we sold clothes online. But one day I decided to move to Europe and start a startup with a few friends of mine called locafox.de, based in Berlin. And you can see a picture of the team here on one of the social events looking very happy. And you can see me and the other founders after we raised a lot of money the other week, also looking very happy. Jumping back to Phinx quickly. Why exactly should I use Phinx? Well, database migrations are actually, they're not a new thing. Phinx makes it a very convenient way to change your database schema over time. And the great thing about Phinx is you can actually write your database migrations using pure PHP code. And I know a number of frameworks can also do this, but with tools like DB deploy, you can't. Using PHP code is of course a benefit or a bonus if you want to, say, use SQLite in development, but maybe you prefer to use Postgres in production. If you write some specific SQL stuff for Postgres in production, it won't work in development. You can also migrate up and down, and we support, I think, 4 database vendors at the moment, including Microsoft, MySQL, Postgres, and SQLite. You can also read the Wikipedia page if you want more of an overview on database migrations. The reason I ask if people use Phinx in production, and there are actually a lot of people, including myself, technically it's still pre 1.0.0. So The API is still changing slightly. We're starting to freeze it now, but it's still considered slightly not there yet. However, I'd recommend using it. Here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to add Phinx to a sample project in a minute, and then I'm going to walk you through some of the commands. But basically, let's just jump straight into the demo now, as I'm running a bit short of time. Hopefully the internet works well for me today as well, but we can go offline if need be. Right, everybody can see this? Cool. Let's just jump to my GitHub quickly. And if you guys want to follow along at home later, you can basically see I've got this project on GitHub here. Very, very simple. I'll blow this up a little bit. Just go ahead and clone that now. Cool. Now I've basically got a screencast project. I'll just go into it. Great, and I'll show you what it is. It's just basically a really simple Silex application I whipped up on a weekend. I've never used Silex before, but I'll show you what it looks like. Just blow that up again here. Okay, cool. Okay, brilliant. Now, this project, believe it or not, if I try to run it right now using PHP's built-in web server, everybody know PHP has a web server built in? Yep, cool. Let's go and have a look. Oh, something doesn't look good. Looks like we need to do a few things first. It looks like Composer's missing a few dependencies, and in fact I'm missing Composer itself. So now's probably a good time to install Phinx. Luckily, we've got this button on the website. Now I'm just going to quickly run Composer. Everybody, I guess, has seen this before. Don't worry, I've cached everything, so it's going to be quick. There we go. As you can see, there's also Doctrine flying past there. I'm only using that because I was too lazy to write some select queries, but Phinx does not depend on Doctrine. We'll start that web server again. Now we're up to a good part. So basically, the application's running, but I don't have a database. So now would be a good time to create a database. I'm going to use MySQL to start with today. Let's spell this right. Okay. Brilliant. So I've got a database. Back to the website. But it turns out I don't have a few tables. The application I wrote is actually a very simple, trivial guestbook application where you can put in your name and a message and then sign it. This is where Phinx comes into play now. I'm actually going to use it to create these database tables for me by writing a migration. We can do this with Phinx's create command. Basically what I'm saying here is create a migration called create post table. Phinx always requires you to type your migration names in camel case. This is how it maps them to file names. If I push enter, I basically, forgot to initialize my project for Phinx. Let's do that quickly. Bang, let's run this again. Boom, need to make a folder. Now we're good. Obviously very, very foolproof. You can see here, I know I have that migrations file created. You might notice that there's a big long number in front of this. I actually stole that from the Ruby guys. It's basically a timestamp. Timestamps are way better, I think, than version numbers, like auto-incrementing version numbers, because if you're working with source control, maybe somebody else uses version 5 and you're using version 5. So it's much better to use a timestamp down to the second, because it's very unlikely somebody's going to write a migration at the exact same second as somebody else, and then you can roughly sort them as well. We'll go drop some code into that migration now, but first I'll just configure my SQL. Cool, I run root locally without any passwords, so that's great. Now let's open up that migration. We've got two methods here. I'll speak about this top one a little bit later, but first I'll talk about the first two, the up method and the down method. Now the up method, we basically put in the code that we want Phinx to run when it's migrating up. So this means when I run the command, it will basically execute code in here for each migration it finds up to which version I want to migrate up to, default being run everything. We also then have a down method where I'd put in essentially how to undo this migration. So in this migration here, I'm going to create a post table in the up step, and in the down step, I'll basically just drop it. So I can change the database, but then I could also roll it back. Just grab something I prepared earlier. Drop that in there. We'll just do a little bit of formatting, PSR, whatever it is. And let's drop that database table here as well. Okay, great. Now you might have noticed that I'm basically creating this table using pure PHP code. And we do that with a special helper method called the table, which basically brings back a Phinx table object that you can then manipulate. So in this case, I'm adding columns to it, an author column and a message column. Now we use string instead of varchar. In MySQL, we actually use a few sort of common data type names because not all databases have the same columns. So we try to standardize it a little bit. For MySQL though, string just maps to varchar, and limit is just obviously the limit. Text is text. There's also a helper timestamp as well method, which automatically creates a created at and an updated at column. And then of course save commits and writes the table. Drop table in down basically does the opposite. So let's go ahead and run that. Just check if I've got MySQL running, or we're not going to get very far. It looks like I do. Right. Now, this command I've just typed out now, I'm more or less calling Phinx, and I'm saying let's migrate, but I want to migrate for the development environment. That's important because Phinx actually supports multiple environments. You can see here, I'm using development locally, but production, I might have a different username and password. I'll change VV to just V. This gives me a bit of verbosity about what's going on. Looks like something went wrong. Let's have a look. Probably spelt the database wrong. Looks like there's a space in there and a dot. I put that in deliberately. You can see now it's actually worked. So basically we've gone and created that table, and you can see exactly when you pass the V parameter how long it takes. Now if I open up MySQL, just to tell you I'm not cheating, let's just put that up the top. You can see there's now two tables there. There's basically the post table that I just wanted to create, and there's also a Phinx log table. I'll speak about the post table first, because you notice that I only asked for an author column, a message column, and then the timestamps column. Those first two columns have been created, and the add timestamps helper method has automatically created the second two. There's also a field called ID. Phinx actually creates this by default on every new table that you ask for, so you get an auto-incrementing primary ID called ID. You can actually disable this, but it's turned on by default. This is a little bit similar to other frameworks. I'll quickly describe the Phinx log table, and that's basically an important part for Phinx where it can see exactly, keep track of which migrations have been run. This is really good if you store it in their database, because then you can obviously copy your database, give it to another developer with MySQL dump, and they're going to have the exact same state of their database. Let's jump out of this quickly. Right. This time I'm going to use a command called the status command. I can just check that I've wrote my migration or it's been migrated. And I can see here that of course it has been migrated. Now what's cool is Phinx has a command called rollback. So if I've just run a migration, but really I want to undo it, hence delete the table, I can pass in rollback instead of migrate. And we can see here that it's actually deleting the table. What I'm going to do now is obviously migrate back up again so I can show you that my guestbook application now works. And this is basically just a snippet of code here to start the Silex application. Boom, guestbook. Twitter Bootstrap theme, very simple. New message, I'm going to type test and I'll say having fun at phptour 2015. You can see it's obviously posted there correctly. Now it turns out if I go in and add another message under test, it will also accept that. But I don't want this. I only want my guestbook to be able to be signed by people once. So one name, one signature. To get around this, I'm actually going to, instead I could do it in PHP, but I'm going to, as I'm using a relational database, I'm going to use an index, a unique index to prevent this. Of course, I can't add the unique index as I've now got two usernames that are the same. So what I'll do is roll back again quickly. Don't do this in production, by the way. And migrate back up again. Now, let's create a new migration. This time, I'll call it create author index. And you can see it's created a new file there for me. I'll just steal a bit of code there. Now this is when it gets exciting because I'm going to basically uncomment this method here called change. Now discovered in Ruby, I think Rails, was it 3.1? 3.1 I think. Yeah, 3.1, there's this Tenderlove guy, famous Ruby programmer, and he invented this thing in Rails active record called reversible migrations. So basically a developer can write the code to migrate up, and Rails could figure out how to reverse all the code and basically do the opposite, migrating back down again. Only for a few commands, but most of the ones you use most of the time. And I thought, that's not fair. Why can all these Ruby guys have this fun? Why can't we have it in PHP? So I went and stole all the code and I rewrote it in PHP. And what I'll demonstrate here is basically adding that index. I'll just clear the screen quickly, migrate again. You can see it's actually added that index. And now I'm going to basically roll back using a parameter I haven't used yet, which is t. Even though I'm still using the migrate command, I can set the timestamp to basically 0, which means we're going to go back to the beginning of time, which means no database. So I'll push that, and now I've got nothing. But obviously, it's somehow figured out to go to that post table and drop that author index. I'll go back up again quickly. And then to prove I'm not cheating, I'll basically open my MySQL console. We'll use the database quickly. Whoop. Then we want describe posts. And you can see obviously right here, there's the author column with a unique index on it. Great, so moving along quickly. Just start that web server again. And we can see here, if I load it, I'll put in a test method. You'll notice my posts were deleted because we were rolling back up and down 50 times. There we go. So I've got an integrity constraint violation error here. So that demonstrates the power of Phinx's change method, which is obviously very, very handy if you want to save code, and everybody wants to write less code. That's it here. But to make things even more interesting, I'll now go and run those exact same migrations against a different database. So today I'm going to use Postgres. For that to happen, first I need to quickly break my application. I'll do that here, set this to PG SQL. Of course, I don't use root, I use the Postgres user with no password. That's cool. Right, that's the Silex configuration. Now let's jump to the Phinx YAML. Right, yep, PG SQL, Postgres, and then I think the port's 5432, but I can't remember, so just delete it. I'll quickly create an empty database in Postgres so it doesn't complain. Boom, okay, prove that it's empty. Oh. Oh, need to work. Yep, good. All right, now let's try to run those migrations. That was a bit easy actually. I was expecting something to go wrong. Start that web server again. There you go. That's pretty cool. Obviously those same integrity violations, yeah, put in for Postgres as well. We can just check that here. I think you want to run /d in Postgres. Oh. Anyway, good. Now, how am I going for time? Okay, I'll just jump back to the presentation so I can finish off quickly. Right, so I've had some questions in the community recently. What's happening with Phinx? Are we still contributing to it, developing it? The answer is yes. We all had to take a bit of time off the project, myself included, to concentrate on our paying jobs and our startups, but that's now over. Development has started again, so the question I've been asked a lot, when is version 0.5.0 coming out and what exactly does it include? Today I'm going to announce that we're now moving to the change method by default. So this means up and down are now gone, but they are still supported. We'll just basically prefer to use change because this is what everybody does anyway most of the time. The other big thing which basically brings it as much more bigger competitor to, say, Laravel is, of course, the C command, which has been requested for, I think, more than a year now. Everybody wants it, nobody wants to code it, so I'm probably going to have to build it at some point. So that's a little bit of an update on Phinx 0.5.0. Thank you very much. We'll do questions in a second. You can, of course, find the code that I used today on my GitHub. I'll put the slides up later on the joined in, and then there's obviously the website and everything. Yeah, thanks guys.
Est-ce qu'il y a des questions?
Does anybody have any questions? Right. Could anybody not follow along then? Wasn't too technical at all or anything? Nope. Okay.
Hi, thank you for this presentation. I would just want to know, for the timestamp shortcut for the method, can we set ourselves the name of the field to match our current database code style?
You mean the add timestamps helper method?
Yeah.
Yep. So there's no option at the moment for you to define what column names you want, but you can. All it's doing behind the scenes is just running two add column statements. So you could copy that out of the source code and run that manually. But if you open an issue on the GitHub, yeah, we can take a look at it if it's commonly requested. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Not a problem.
Hi. Can you generate migration from, for example, for Symfony, we can do generate migration with Doctrine. Can you do the same thing with this? Or?
You mean introspect an existing database and generate all your PHP code from it? Yeah, that was the question, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So there's it's actually a commonly requested feature at the moment. It's some people have actually hacked together a few implementations. I would say it's definitely the implementations I've seen are nowhere near production ready yet, and I wouldn't feel comfortable recommending them. So in that case, we're probably prioritising this feature first because it's a little less. It's easier to develop and it's not going to destroy a production system. But the feature you mentioned, it will come. It's something we're thinking of. We're just waiting for, we need to support 4 database vendors at the moment. We need a good solution that works for everyone that's pretty stable as well. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Hi. I have a question. Can we use a specific type of Postgres like HStore or composite type?
Can you use, like a Postgres specific feature?
Yeah.
Yep, so we do support at the moment a few custom Postgres features, like there's the GIS stuff and also the JSON data types. MySQL doesn't support them yet. It might be in 5.7, it's not yet. We do some custom stuff like that. I think that you asked for though, which column data type were you referring to?
HStore.
HStore, yep. It doesn't support HStore at the moment. If you do need to support a custom column though, you can always, there's an execute method and you can always write an alter table statement yourself as a workaround until Phinx supports it.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Yep.
Hello. I'm just wondering about data migration, because here you show us how to migrate some structure, database structure, but what about data migration? Really, when I need to manipulate some data from one version to another, and can I roll back them again? Or
you mean, so not changing the structure of a table, but more sort
exactly.
of, altering data itself. Yeah, I think this has been discussed a couple of times. I'm pretty sure we'll just keep Phinx, we'll follow the Unix philosophy and keep it as a tool doing table structures, database structures purely. Maybe if we look at a tool that can fit with other database systems as well, including NoSQL things, to basically transform data, filter it, enrich it, these types of things, that could be a different tool, I guess.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Any further questions at all? Okay, if anybody wants to ask me anything directly, make sure you catch me this afternoon or tonight at the community beers, because I'll be gone early tomorrow. But once again, thank you for listening to my speech.